The golden rays of a late afternoon sun often cast long, stretching shadows that remind us of the quiet transitions in our own lives. We find ourselves sitting together in this space of shared breath and silent understanding, not to dissect a theory or follow a rigid set of rules, but to simply be present with the heavy, yet sacred weight of what it means to lose something or someone we love. Grief is not a broken bone that needs to be reset, nor is it a puzzle with a final, satisfying piece that completes the picture. It is a vast, mist-covered landscape that we suddenly find ourselves walking through without a map. In these moments, the air can feel thick, and the path ahead seems to vanish into the gray. Yet, it is precisely in this wandering that we begin to discover a different kind of strength, one that does not come from resisting the pain, but from learning how to carry it with a gentle, steady grace. When the world feels like it has shifted on its axis and the familiar landmarks of our daily existence are gone, our first instinct is often to reach out and try to pull the past back into the present. We want to undo what has been done, to speak the words we left unsaid, or to simply feel the warmth of a hand that is no longer there. This longing is the most natural expression of a heart that has known deep connection. It is the echo of love. If we did not love, we would not grieve. So, in a sense, the sorrow we feel is a profound testament to the beauty of what was. It is a quiet, persistent reminder that something truly meaningful took place. Instead of viewing our tears as a sign of weakness or a failure to be strong, we can look at them as a soft rain that washes over the parched earth of our souls, preparing the ground for something new to eventually grow. The ancients understood this flow of nature with a clarity that we sometimes lose in our modern, hurried lives. There is a story from the time of the Buddha about a young man named Sangamaji who had spent many years seeking inner peace. He had left his home and his family to follow the path of mindfulness, leaving behind a wife and a child. After a long time, his wife found him sitting in quiet meditation under a tree in a peaceful grove. She approached him, carrying their young son, and placed the child directly in front of him, hoping to stir his memories and pull him back into the life they once shared. She pleaded with him to look at his son, to remember his responsibilities, and to return to the warmth of their home. Sangamaji remained still, his eyes closed, his breath even and calm. He did not react with anger, nor did he succumb to the overwhelming pull of attachment. When his wife eventually realized that his heart was firmly anchored in a peace that surpassed worldly ties, she picked up the child and walked away. The Buddha, observing this from a distance, remarked on how Sangamaji remained unmoved, neither rejoicing when she arrived nor grieving when she left. At first glance, this might seem cold or detached to our modern ears. We might wonder how someone could remain so still in the face of family and deep personal history. But the essence of this story is not about a lack of feeling. It is about a profound understanding of the nature of presence and the reality of change. Sangamaji was not ignoring his family out of cruelty. He had simply realized that the version of the past his wife was trying to resurrect no longer existed in the way she imagined. He was honoring the present moment exactly as it was, without trying to force it to be something else. This story invites us to look at our own grief through a similar lens of clarity. When we lose someone, we are often grieving the loss of a future we had already built in our minds. We are grieving the conversations that will never happen and the milestones that will now be marked by an empty chair. This is where the sharpest edge of the pain lies. It is the friction between the reality of what is and our internal demand for what should be. Grace begins to enter the picture when we stop fighting the reality of the void. It does not mean the void goes away. It means we stop exhausting ourselves by trying to fill it with ghosts. We start to see that even in the emptiness, there is a space where we can breathe, where we can remember, and where we can eventually find a way to honor what was lost by how we live today. Every breath we take is a small miracle of transition. We inhale the new, and we exhale the old. We cannot hold on to a single breath for too long, or it becomes stagnant and suffocating. Life requires this constant giving and receiving, this eternal rhythm of arriving and departing. When we apply this to the experience of loss, we see that our attempts to freeze time or to keep things exactly as they were are actually what create the most intense suffering. We are like people trying to hold on to the water of a flowing river with our bare hands. The tighter we squeeze, the faster the water slips through our fingers. But if we simply place our hands in the stream and let the water flow over our palms, we feel its coolness, its life, and its movement without the frantic need to possess it. There is a certain kind of humor in the way we humans try to negotiate with the universe. We often find ourselves making silent bargains, promising to be better, to work harder, or to change our ways if only the outcome could be different. It is a very human trait to want to exert control over the uncontrollable. We see this in the stories of the elders who spent their lives trying to build monuments that would last forever, only to watch the wind and the sand slowly reclaim them. There was a dedicated builder in a small village who spent decades constructing a magnificent wall to protect his garden from the changing seasons. He used the finest stones and the strongest mortar, believing that if he could just make the wall high enough and thick enough, his flowers would never wither and the winter would never touch them. One day, a traveling monk passed by and saw the man tirelessly adding more stones to the top of his wall. The monk sat down on a nearby rock and watched with a soft smile. After a while, he asked the man what he was doing. The builder replied with great pride that he was creating a sanctuary where time could not enter. The monk nodded thoughtfully and then pointed to a tiny green vine that was slowly but surely cracking the mortar at the very base of the wall. He observed that while the man was busy building the top, the earth was already reclaiming the bottom. The man realized in that moment that his wall was not protecting his garden. It was merely a heavy weight he had placed upon himself. The flowers inside were indeed safe from the wind, but they were also hidden from the sun and the very life force they needed to thrive. Our grief can sometimes become like that wall. We build it out of our memories, our regrets, and our fears, thinking that if we stay inside it, we are safe from the harshness of the world. But in doing so, we also cut ourselves off from the light. Walking through grief with grace means recognizing that the wall is there, but choosing not to add any more stones to it today. It means noticing the small vine at the base and realizing that life is always moving, always changing, and always finding a way to break through even the hardest structures we create. We can learn to appreciate the beauty of the garden without needing it to stay the same forever. We can learn to love the flowers while they are in bloom and still find meaning in the soil after they have faded. This perspective does not minimize the pain. If anything, it gives the pain a more dignified place to rest. When we stop viewing our sorrow as an enemy to be defeated, we can treat it like a guest who has arrived at our door. We might not have invited this guest, and we might not know how long they plan to stay, but we can still offer them a seat. We can listen to what they have to say. Often, grief has a lot to tell us about what we truly value. It reveals the depths of our capacity for compassion and the strength of our connections. It strips away the superficial layers of our lives and leaves us with what is essential. In this raw state, we are often more open to the subtle beauty of the world than we ever were before. Have you ever noticed how the world seems more vivid after a long period of sadness? The green of the leaves looks deeper, the sound of a bird's song feels more poignant, and the kindness of a stranger seems like a profound gift. This is because grief has broken the shell of our hearts, allowing a different kind of light to enter. It is a light that is tempered by shadow, a wisdom that has been forged in the fire of loss. This is the grace we speak of. It is the ability to walk through the fire and come out not just as survivors, but as individuals who carry a more profound sense of empathy for every living being. We begin to see that everyone we meet is also carrying their own hidden burdens, their own silent losses, and their own walks through the mist. There was an old woman who lived near a great forest, and she was known throughout the land for her remarkable ability to listen. People would travel for days just to sit with her for an hour. One day, a man who had lost his entire livelihood and his home came to see her. He sat before her and poured out his heart, his voice shaking with the weight of his misfortune. He expected her to give him advice, to tell him how to rebuild, or perhaps to offer some profound philosophical explanation for his suffering. Instead, she simply sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the flickering flame of a small oil lamp between them. When he finally stopped speaking, exhausted by his own story, she looked at him and said that the flame was only visible because the room was dark. She explained that if the sun were shining brightly through the windows, the tiny light of the lamp would be forgotten. But in the darkness, that small flame becomes the center of the world. It provides warmth, it guides the way, and it reminds us that light exists. Our losses, she suggested, are like the darkness that falls upon the room of our lives. They are not the end of the story, but the conditions that allow us to see the small, steady flames of hope and kindness that we might have overlooked in the brightness of our success. The man left her small hut not with a plan, but with a feeling of lightness. He realized that while he had lost much, he had not lost the capacity to see the light. When we are in the middle of a storm, it is very hard to remember that the sky is still there, vast and blue, above the clouds. We are so focused on the wind and the rain that we forget the storm is a temporary event. It is a movement of energy. The same is true for the storms of our emotions. They sweep through our lives, sometimes with devastating force, but they do not define the entirety of our existence. We are the sky, and the grief is the cloud. The cloud may be dark and heavy, it may linger for a long time, and it may even block out the sun for a season, but it is not the sky. Understanding this distinction is a crucial step in walking with grace. We allow the clouds to pass. We do not try to blow them away with our breath, which would only exhaust us. We simply wait, and we watch, and we trust in the vastness of our own being to hold it all. The Buddha often spoke about the concept of impermanence, not as a depressing fact of life, but as a liberating truth. If things were permanent, we would be stuck forever in our mistakes, our pain, and our limitations. It is because things change that growth is possible. It is because things pass away that new things can be born. This cycle is the very heartbeat of the universe. When we lose a loved one, we are experiencing the most painful side of this truth. But even in this pain, there is a hidden seed of transformation. We are being asked to expand our understanding of what it means to exist. We are being asked to see that even though the physical form has changed, the essence of the connection and the impact of that life continue to ripple outward in ways we cannot always see. Think of a stone dropped into a still pond. The stone eventually sinks to the bottom and out of sight, but the ripples it created continue to move across the surface of the water, reaching the farthest shores and touching everything in their path. The person we lost is like that stone. Their physical presence may have moved beyond our sight, but the ripples of their laughter, their kindness, their lessons, and their love are still moving through us. They are moving through the people they touched and the world they inhabited. When we live our lives with kindness and awareness, we are keeping those ripples alive. We are honoring the stone by acknowledging the movement it created in the water. This is a much more active and hopeful way to engage with loss. It moves us from a state of passive suffering to a state of purposeful living. We begin to ask ourselves how we can embody the qualities we loved most in the person who is gone. If they were generous, we find ways to be more generous. If they were patient, we practice patience in our daily lives. In this way, they are never truly gone. They become a part of the fabric of our own character. They live on through our actions and our choices. This is the ultimate form of grace. It is the alchemy of turning sorrow into service, and loss into a more profound way of loving the world. There is a beautiful story about a group of travelers who were crossing a high mountain pass in the middle of winter. The wind was howling, and the snow was so thick they could barely see their own feet. They were cold, tired, and beginning to lose hope. Among them was an elderly traveler who seemed remarkably calm despite the harsh conditions. He walked with a steady pace, neither rushing nor lagging behind. When they finally reached a small shelter and huddled around a meager fire, one of the younger travelers asked him how he managed to stay so composed when everyone else was panicking. The old man smiled and said that he simply focused on the single step he was taking at that moment. He explained that if he thought about the miles left to go, he became overwhelmed. If he thought about the warmth of his home, he became miserable. But if he only focused on placing his foot firmly in the snow for 1 second, he found he had the strength for that one step. And then, he found he had the strength for the next one. Walking through grief is very much like crossing that mountain pass. We cannot see the end of the journey from where we are standing today. The conditions are harsh and the path is steep. But we do have enough strength for one step. We have enough strength to get through this hour, or even just this minute. Grace is the wisdom to focus on that single step and the kindness to forgive ourselves when we stumble. Sometimes, the weight of the world feels like it is resting solely on our shoulders. We look around and see others going about their lives, laughing and making plans, and we feel a profound sense of isolation. It is as if we are living in a different dimension, one where the colors are muted and the sounds are muffled. This sense of being apart is one of the most difficult aspects of grief. We feel that no one can truly understand the specific shape of our pain. And in a way, that is true. Every relationship is unique, and every loss is personal. But while the details of our stories are different, the texture of the human heart is the same. We are all bound together by our vulnerability and our shared capacity for suffering. When we realize this, the walls of our isolation begin to thin. We see that we are not walking alone in the mist. We are part of a vast, invisible procession of souls who have all, at one time or another, felt exactly what we are feeling. There is a great comfort in this shared humanity. We can look at a stranger on the street and realize that they, too, have loved and lost. They, too, have stayed awake in the quiet hours of the night, wondering how to go on. This realization fosters a deep sense of compassion, not just for others, but for ourselves. We start to treat our own hearts with the same tenderness we would offer to a dear friend who was hurting. In the ancient times, there was a king who was deeply troubled by the fleeting nature of happiness and the inevitability of sorrow. He called together the wisest people in his kingdom and commanded them to create a ring for him that would make him happy when he was sad. They consulted with each other for many days and finally presented the king with a simple gold band. On the inside of the ring, they had engraved 4 words. When the king read them, he felt a profound sense of peace. The words were, "This too shall pass." These words are a powerful anchor in the middle of a storm. When we are drowning in grief, they remind us that the intensity of the pain will eventually shift. It does not mean the loss was not significant, but it means that our relationship to the pain will evolve. The sharp, jagged edges will eventually become smoother, like a stone in a river. The overwhelming waves will eventually become a steady tide. This is not a promise that things will go back to the way they were, but a promise that we will not always feel this broken. We are resilient beings, capable of carrying much more than we think we can. Our hearts have an incredible capacity to heal, to adapt, and to eventually find joy again, even if it is a different, more quiet kind of joy than we knew before. This trust in the passing of time and the natural process of healing is a vital part of walking with grace. We do not need to rush the process. We just need to stay in the flow. Think of the way a tree responds to the change of seasons. In the autumn, it does not cling to its leaves with desperation. It does not fight the cooling air or the shortening days. It simply lets go. It allows the leaves to fall, knowing that this period of shedding is necessary for its survival. During the winter, the tree stands bare and seemingly dormant. To an outside observer, it might look like the tree has lost everything. But deep within the earth, its roots are still alive, and inside the trunk, the sap is quietly waiting. The tree is not dead, it is resting. It is gathering its strength for the return of the spring. We, too, have our seasons of shedding. There are times when we must let go of what we knew and enter a period of quiet, inward focus. It might feel like a winter of the soul, cold and empty. But if we can trust in the natural cycle, we know that this period of dormancy is not the end. It is a preparation for a new kind of growth that we cannot yet imagine. The silence of a winter garden is not the silence of death but the silence of a profound and necessary gathering of strength, much like the quiet spaces that open up in our hearts after a great loss has swept through. We often fear these quiet spaces, filling them with noise, distractions, or the endless replays of what might have been, yet it is in this very stillness that the seeds of a new understanding begin to stir beneath the surface. When we stop struggling against the cold, we find that the earth beneath our feet remains solid and supportive, holding us even when we feel we have no strength to hold ourselves. This realization is like finding a hidden spring in the middle of a desert, a source of nourishment that does not depend on our external circumstances but on the deep, intrinsic resilience of the human spirit. There is a gentle story about a monk named Ananda, who was known for his deep devotion and his sensitive heart. After the passing of his greatest teacher, he found himself overwhelmed by a grief that felt as vast as the ocean. He sat by a river, watching the water flow toward the horizon, and felt that his own life had lost its direction and its light. A fellow traveler, seeing his sorrow, sat beside him and remained silent for a long time. Eventually, the traveler picked up a handful of dry sand and let it slip through his fingers, pointing out that while the sand was falling, the river was still moving, and the sun was still setting in a blaze of gold. The traveler suggested that grief is like holding on to the dry sand while forgetting to notice the river and the sun. He told Ananda that the teacher had not left him a map of the past, but a lamp for the present. By focusing so intensely on the void left behind, Ananda was accidentally blowing out the very lamp his teacher had spent a lifetime lighting. This simple observation shifted something within the young monk. He realized that honoring a legacy does not mean standing still in the shadow of a monument, it means carrying the light into the dark places of the world. He stood up, bowed to the river, and began to walk again, not because the pain had vanished, but because he understood that his life was a continuation of the beauty he had lost. When we carry this perspective into our own lives, we begin to see that our loved ones are not behind us in the past, but within us in the present. Every time we choose kindness over anger, every time we offer a word of comfort to someone else who is hurting, we are expressing the love that we thought was gone. This is a living, breathing form of remembrance that transforms the heavy lead of sorrow into the bright gold of compassion. It allows us to move through the world with a heart that is broken open rather than broken apart. A heart that is broken open has more room for the world, more room for the struggles of others, and more room for the subtle joys that often go unnoticed when we are too busy trying to keep everything intact. We might find ourselves smiling at the memory of a particular quirk, a favorite joke, or the specific way the light caught a person's eyes, and in those moments, the grief feels less like a burden and more like a companion. It becomes a quiet thread woven into the fabric of our daily existence, adding depth and richness to the pattern. There is a certain dignity in this kind of living, a grace that does not demand answers but finds meaning in the questions. We start to understand that we do not need to get over our loss, as if it were an obstacle to be cleared. Instead, we learn to incorporate it, making it a part of who we are becoming. The ancient texts often speak of the two arrows to describe the nature of suffering. The first arrow is the event itself, the loss, the pain, or the physical hurt that life inevitably brings our way. We cannot avoid this first arrow, it is part of the human condition. However, the second arrow is our reaction to the first. It is the story we tell ourselves about the pain, the guilt we heap upon our shoulders, the why me and the what if that keep the wound from healing. While we cannot stop the first arrow, we have the power to put down the second one. Walking with grace means feeling the sting of the first arrow without letting the second one pierce our spirit. We acknowledge the hurt, we tend to it with kindness, but we do not let it define our entire identity. Imagine a master potter working with a piece of clay that has a flaw. Instead of discarding the clay, the potter uses the flaw to create a unique and beautiful pattern in the finished vessel. The crack becomes the most interesting part of the pot, the place where the light catches the glaze in a special way. Our lives are like that clay. The losses we experience are the cracks, the places where we were broken by the world. But instead of seeing ourselves as damaged goods, we can see ourselves as kintsugi art, the Japanese practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. The repair does not hide the break, it highlights it, making the object even more valuable and beautiful than it was before it was broken. Our scars, whether visible or hidden in the depths of our hearts, are the gold in our own stories. They are the evidence of our survival, our growth, and our capacity to heal. They tell the world that we have lived, that we have loved, and that we have found a way to continue. When we share our stories with others, we are showing them our gold. We are giving them permission to see the beauty in their own brokenness. This creates a ripple effect of healing that goes far beyond our own lives. It builds a community of grace, where we no longer have to hide our pain but can carry it openly, knowing that it is part of what makes us truly human. In a small village nestled in a valley, there was a man who was known for his beautiful singing voice. He sang at every wedding and every celebration, bringing joy to everyone who heard him. But one day, a great tragedy struck his family, and his voice went silent. For months, he did not utter a single note. The villagers missed his music, but they understood his silence. One evening, he was sitting by a small fire when he saw a young child trying to hum a tune they had heard him sing long ago. The child was struggling with the melody, getting the notes wrong and looking frustrated. The man felt a sudden spark of compassion. He didn't think about his own sorrow or his silent voice, he only thought about helping the child. He opened his mouth and softly sang the correct note. Then another. Before he knew it, he was singing the entire song, and though his voice was rougher and carried a deeper resonance of sadness than before, it was also more beautiful. It was a voice that had been through the fire and had found a new kind of sweetness. The villagers gathered around, not with cheers, but with a quiet, reverent awe. They realized that the man wasn't singing despite his loss, but through it. His music had become a bridge between the world of shadows and the world of light. Each of us has a song like that man, a unique way of contributing to the world that can be silenced by grief. We might think our music is gone forever, that the joy has been extinguished. But grace invites us to hum the first note again, not for ourselves, but for someone else who might be struggling. When we focus on the needs of others, even in small, simple ways, we often find that our own voice begins to return. It may not be the same voice we had before, but it will be a voice that carries the wisdom of the journey. It will be a voice that can reach into the hearts of others because it knows the landscape of loss so well. This path of grace is not a straight line. There will be days when the mist returns and we feel like we are back at the beginning. There will be moments when a sudden memory catches us off guard and the air leaves our lungs. This is not a sign of failure, it is simply the nature of the landscape. The tide comes in, and the tide goes out. We do not judge the ocean for its movement, and we should not judge ourselves for ours. On the days when the weight feels heavy, we can simply sit down and rest. We can be gentle with ourselves, offering the same patience we would give to a small child who is tired from a long walk. The Buddha taught that everything in the universe is in a constant state of flux, like a flame that is never the same from one second to the next. The candle stays the same shape, but the fire is always moving, always consuming, always transforming. When we look at our lives, we often see the shape of the candle and forget about the movement of the fire. We try to keep the shape from changing, but the fire must burn for the light to exist. Our grief is part of that burning. It is the process of transformation that allows us to shed the old and make room for the new. It is the heat that tempers the steel of our souls. There was an artist who lived in a bustling city and spent his days painting the most intricate and colorful landscapes. He was famous for his ability to capture the exact shade of a sunset or the delicate texture of a flower petal. When he lost his eyesight late in life, everyone thought his career was over. He spent a long time in a world of darkness, feeling like a painter with no canvas. But slowly, he began to notice the world in a different way. He felt the warmth of the sun on his skin, the rhythm of the rain against the window, and the vibrations of the music drifting from a neighbor's house. He began to create art again, but this time it wasn't with paint and brushes. He used his hands to mold clay, capturing the feeling of a sunset or the energy of a storm. People who touched his sculptures said they felt a sense of peace and strength they had never experienced with his paintings. The artist realized that his physical sight had been a beautiful gift, but it had also been a limitation. It had kept him focused on the surface of things. In the darkness, he had discovered the essence. He hadn't lost his art, he had merely changed the medium. Loss often feels like a loss of sight, a loss of the way we used to see our future and ourselves. But as we walk through the mist, we start to develop a different kind of vision. We begin to see with our hearts instead of just our eyes. We notice the subtle connections that bind us all together. We perceive the beauty in the mundane and the sacred in the ordinary. We realize that even when the outer world changes, the inner capacity for creativity and love remains untouched. This heart vision is a gift of the journey, a clarity that only comes from having navigated the shadows. It is helpful to remember that even the most beautiful lotus flower starts its life in the dark, murky mud at the bottom of a pond. It has to push through the cold, heavy water, reaching upward toward the light it cannot yet see. The mud is not an obstacle to the lotus, it is the source of its nourishment. Without the mud, the flower would not have the strength to reach the surface. Our difficulties and our losses are the mud of our lives. They are not there to bury us, but to provide the nutrients we need to grow into something extraordinary. When the lotus finally breaks the surface and opens its petals to the sun, it is perfectly clean and radiant, untouched by the mud it grew from. We are like that lotus. We are in the process of pushing through the heavy waters of our grief, reaching for a light that sometimes feels very far away. But every effort we make, every breath we take with awareness, and every act of kindness we perform is a movement toward the surface. We are not defined by the mud we are in, we are defined by our upward reach. And just as the lotus does not need to hurry the process, we do not need to hurry our own healing. The sun is always there, waiting for us to break through. There is a simple practice that can help us stay grounded during the more difficult parts of this walk. It is the practice of noticing. Throughout the day, we can pause for a few seconds and simply notice 3 things we can see, 3 things we can hear, and 3 things we can feel. We might notice the color of a leaf, the sound of a distant car, or the sensation of our feet on the floor. This simple act pulls us out of the swirling clouds of our thoughts and brings us back to the present moment. It reminds us that even in the midst of our sorrow, the world is still happening. Life is still present, and we are still a part of it. By anchoring ourselves in the now, we prevent our minds from wandering into the painful past or the anxious future. We create a small island of peace in the middle of the stormy sea. On this island, we can catch our breath. We can remember that we are safe in this moment, even if the next moment feels uncertain. Grace is found in these tiny pockets of presence. It is the quiet yes we say to the current breath, the small acknowledgement that we are here, and that being here is enough. We often think that we need to do something big or significant to overcome our grief. We feel we need to find a grand purpose or make a major change. But often, the most profound healing happens in the smallest of actions. It's in the way we prepare a meal, the way we tend to a plant, or the way we listen to a friend. These small acts of care are the threads that slowly mend the fabric of our lives. They are the quiet affirmations of life that say, I am still here, and I still care. When we string these moments together, like beads on a necklace, we find that we have created something beautiful and enduring. The stories of the past remind us that even the most enlightened beings faced loss and sorrow. They did not bypass the human experience, they walked right through the center of it. Their greatness didn't come from an absence of pain, but from the way they held that pain with compassion and wisdom. They showed us that it is possible to be deeply moved by the world and yet remain anchored in a peace that is not shaken by external events. This is the goal of our walk together, not to become numb, but to become more deeply alive. As the path winds through the forest, the trees begin to thin out, and we catch glimpses of the valley below. The view is different from this height. We can see the patterns of the landscape, the way the river bends, and the way the shadows dance across the fields. From up here, the obstacles we faced on the path look smaller, part of a much larger and more complex whole. This is the perspective that time and grace eventually bring. We start to see our individual losses as part of the grand tapestry of human existence, a tapestry that is infinitely beautiful precisely because it contains every shade of emotion and every kind of experience. The view from the heights of our experience allows us to see that the shadows we once feared are merely the absence of light in certain corners, and as the sun moves, those shadows shift and change their shape. We begin to understand that the darkness was never permanent, just as the heavy clouds of grief eventually thin to reveal the stars that were always there. There is an ancient story about a traveler who was caught in a deep valley as night fell. He was terrified of the wild animals he imagined were lurking in the bushes and the steep cliffs he could no longer see. He spent the entire night huddled against a cold rock, shivering with a fear that felt like a physical weight on his chest. When the first light of dawn touched the rim of the valley, he looked around and realized that the terrifying shapes he saw in the dark were actually beautiful flowering shrubs. The steep cliff he feared falling from was actually a gentle slope leading to a clear, sparkling stream. His fear had been a product of the darkness, not the reality of the landscape. Our grief can often act like that night in the valley. It distorts our perception, making the world seem more dangerous and less kind than it truly is. Grace is the dawn that slowly reveals the true nature of things. It shows us that even in our deepest sorrow, we are surrounded by a world that is fundamentally supportive and full of hidden beauty. This realization does not come all at once, but in small, quiet moments of clarity. It might happen when you are washing your hands and notice the way the light catches the soap bubbles, or when you see a bird building a nest with tireless dedication. These tiny glimpses of life continuing are the signals that the dawn is coming. We learn to trust these signals, even when the night still feels cold. We start to see that the universe is not indifferent to our pain, but is constantly offering us small gestures of comfort if we are quiet enough to notice them. There was a wise elder in a remote mountain village who was known for his ability to find peace in any situation. One year, a great fire swept through the forest, destroying many of the homes and the ancient trees the villagers held sacred. Everyone was in despair, mourning the loss of their history and their shelter. The elder, however, was seen walking through the blackened remains of the forest, carefully looking at the ground. When the villagers asked him how he could be so calm amidst such devastation, he pointed to a tiny green shoot pushing through the ash. He told them that the fire had cleared away the thick undergrowth that had been choking the forest floor for years. Now, for the first time in generations, the sun could reach the soil directly. The seeds that had been lying dormant for decades were finally able to wake up. He said that the fire was not an end, but a fierce beginning. The forest would grow back stronger, more diverse, and more vibrant than before. This is a powerful metaphor for the fires that sweep through our own lives. The losses we endure clear away the structures we have become too dependent on, forcing us to find a new kind of ground. While the heat is painful and the loss is real, the ash eventually becomes the most fertile soil. The parts of ourselves that were dormant, our hidden strengths, our capacity for deep empathy, our spiritual resilience, begin to sprout in the space that was cleared by the flames. We are not just rebuilding what was lost, we are allowing a new, more authentic version of ourselves to emerge. This is the grace of transformation. It is the ability to see the green shoot in the middle of the blackened forest and to know that life is already at work, mending what was broken. When we talk about walking with grace, we are also talking about the importance of being patient with the timing of our own hearts. We live in a world that often demands quick fixes and rapid recoveries. We are told to move on, to stay busy, or to find closure. But the heart does not work on a schedule. It has its own seasons, its own rhythms of opening and closing. Trying to force ourselves to feel better before we are ready is like trying to pull a flower bud open with our fingers. We only end up bruising the petals. Grace is the willingness to let the flower bloom in its own time, under the warmth of our own compassion. We can learn a lot from the way water moves over rocks in a stream. The water does not try to push the rocks out of the way. It does not argue with them or feel resentful of their presence. It simply flows around them. It finds the path of least resistance, moving with a fluid, effortless grace. Over time, the constant, gentle touch of the water rounds the sharp edges of the stone, turning it into a smooth pebble. Our grief is like those rocks in the stream. If we try to fight them, we only create turbulence and exhaustion. But if we allow our lives to flow around the pain, being soft and adaptable, the edges of the sorrow eventually soften too. The pain remains, but it no longer cuts us. It becomes a part of the landscape of our lives, a smooth stone that we can touch without being hurt. This fluidity is a hallmark of a heart that has found its way back to the natural flow of existence. We are no longer stuck in the past or anxious about the future. We are moving with the current of the present moment, trusting that the water knows where it is going. This trust is not a blind belief, but a deep, experiential knowing that we have survived the rapids and are now in a deeper, calmer part of the river. There is a story of a young woman who lost her sight and felt that her life had become a narrow, dark hallway. She spent years feeling bitter and trapped by her limitations. One day, she was sitting in a garden and a young child came up to her and placed a small, round object in her hand. The child asked her what it was. The woman felt the object with her fingers. It was smooth, slightly cool, and had a small indentation at the top. She realized it was a simple stone, but as she held it, she began to notice things she had never paid attention to when she could see. She felt the subtle vibrations of the earth beneath her feet. She smelled the different scents of the flowers carried by the breeze. She heard the complex layers of sound in the trees. She realized that while her world had become smaller in one way, it had become infinitely deeper in another. She started to teach others how to see with their touch and their hearing, opening up a whole new world for people who had always taken their sight for granted. Her loss had become her greatest gift, the key that unlocked a level of perception she never would have found otherwise. This is the alchemy of grace. It takes the very thing that seems to limit us and turns it into the source of our greatest contribution. When we stop mourning the life we thought we were supposed to have, we can start fully inhabiting the life we actually have. We discover that there is a profound beauty in that narrow hallway, if we stop trying to run back to the entrance. We find that the walls are covered in textures we never felt and that there are doors we never noticed because we were too busy looking for the exit. In our journey, we often encounter others who are also walking through their own versions of the mist. Sometimes we feel we have nothing to offer them because we are still struggling ourselves. But grace teaches us that the most valuable thing we can give is not a solution, but our presence. We don't need to have the right words, we just need to be willing to sit in the silence with them. When two people sit together in their shared vulnerability, a bridge is built that can carry both of them across the deepest waters. The Buddha once encountered a man who was so overwhelmed by the loss of his family that he had lost his mind and was wandering the streets in despair. The Buddha did not lecture him on the nature of impermanence or tell him to let go. He simply walked beside him. He stayed with him in his madness, offering a steady, calm presence that acted like an anchor. Slowly, the man began to sense the peace emanating from the Buddha. He began to calm down, his mind cleared, and he was eventually able to face his grief with a newfound strength. This story reminds us that we are all walking each other home, as a modern sage once said. We are all in this together, and our willingness to stay present with each other's pain is the highest form of spiritual practice. It is the practical application of compassion. When we offer this to others, we also offer it to ourselves. We realize that we don't have to be perfect or healed to be of service. Our very wounds can be the points of connection that allow us to reach out and touch another human soul. As we continue our walk, the air feels a bit lighter. The path is still there, but our legs feel stronger. We have learned that we don't have to carry the whole world, we just have to carry our own heart with kindness. We see that the grief has not made us smaller, but has expanded us. We have more room for joy, more room for mystery, and more room for the simple, profound reality of being alive. We start to notice that the trees are not just standing there, they are reaching. The birds are not just flying, they are playing with the wind. The world is a vibrant, living conversation, and we are finally ready to listen. There was a famous musician who was known for his ability to play the most complex and beautiful melodies on his flute. One day, his flute was accidentally stepped on and cracked. He was devastated, believing his music was gone. He tried to glue the pieces back together, but the flute never sounded the same. It had a breathy, haunting quality to its tone that it didn't have before. He was about to throw it away when he decided to play one last song. To his surprise, the audience was moved to tears by the new sound. They said the music felt more human, more soulful, as if the flute itself was breathing with the player. The crack in the flute had changed the way the air moved through it, creating a resonance that was deeper and more poignant than the original perfect tone. The musician realized that the flaw was actually a new kind of beauty. He stopped trying to fix the crack and started learning how to play with it. We are like that flute. The experiences that break us also change our tone. They give our lives a resonance that isn't possible for those who have never known loss. Our voices might be a bit more breathy, our laughter might have a hint of a tear in it, but the music we make is deeper and more meaningful. It carries the weight of our history and the lightness of our grace. We don't need to be fixed to be beautiful. We just need to keep playing our song, allowing the cracks to add their own unique music to the melody. The path we are on is not leading to a destination where the grief is gone. It is leading to a place where the grief is integrated into the wholeness of our being. We are moving toward a state of peaceful coexistence with our history. We can look back at the difficult stretches of the path and feel a sense of gratitude for the strength they gave us. We can look forward to the unknown future with a sense of curiosity rather than fear. We are becoming like the mountains, majestic, steady, and able to hold both the bright sun and the deep shadows without losing our essence. Every step we take is an act of courage. Every time we choose to stay open when we want to shut down, we are performing a small miracle. This is the way of the heart. It is a slow, patient, and deeply rewarding journey. We are discovering that the grace we were looking for was not something we had to find, but something that was already within us, waiting for the right conditions to reveal itself. We are the architects of our own healing, and every breath is a new stone in the foundation of our peace. As we move forward, we notice that the landscape is changing again. The dense forest is giving way to open meadows filled with wildflowers. The sun is higher in the sky, and the air is filled with the scent of pine and earth. We feel a sense of lightness in our steps that we haven't felt in a long time. It's not that we have forgotten where we came from, but that we have finally arrived in the present. We are here, fully and vibrantly here, and that is the greatest grace of all. The openness of the meadow invites a different kind of reflection, one where the boundaries between our inner world and the vastness around us begin to soften and blur. We start to see that the grief we thought was a wall was actually a gateway, leading us into a more profound intimacy with the fabric of existence itself. It is as if we have been looking at a single thread for so long that we forgot it was part of a magnificent, infinite tapestry. In this expanded state, the pain of loss does not vanish, but it ceases to be the only thing we see. It becomes a deep, resonant bass note in a symphony that also includes the bright, high flutes of joy and the steady rhythm of everyday life. This is the integration that grace brings, a wholeness that does not require the removal of the difficult parts to be beautiful. There is a story of a young monk who spent years practicing mindfulness in a quiet monastery high in the mountains. He was disciplined, calm, and seemed to have mastered the art of staying centered. However, when he returned to his home village and discovered that his childhood home had been sold and the ancient oak tree he loved had been cut down, he felt a surge of grief and anger that shook him to his core. He went to his teacher, feeling like a failure, and confessed that all his years of practice had vanished in a single moment of loss. The teacher looked at him with great tenderness and said that the practice had not vanished, it had simply moved from the head to the heart. The teacher explained that being calm in a quiet room is like sailing a boat on a mirror-like lake. It is easy, but it does not make one a sailor. True navigation happens when the waves rise and the wind begins to howl. The grief the monk was feeling was not a sign that he had failed his training, but the very moment his training was truly beginning. He was being asked to find the stillness not away from the pain, but right in the center of it. He was being asked to be the lake that holds both the reflection of the moon and the ripples of the storm. This perspective shifted the monk's understanding of his own path. He realized that spirituality is not about avoiding the messiness of being human, but about diving into it with a heart that is wide enough to hold it all. We are often like that young monk, believing that if we were just spiritual enough or strong enough, we wouldn't feel the sting of loss so deeply. But the truth is exactly the opposite. The more we open our hearts to life, the more we open ourselves to the possibility of sorrow. This is the price of admission for a life lived with depth and connection. If we want to feel the warmth of the sun, we must also be willing to stand in the shadow. Grace is the wisdom to stop trying to negotiate the price. We accept the whole package, knowing that the capacity to grieve is the very same capacity that allows us to love, to create, and to wonder. Think of a master gardener who tends to a diverse and wild plot of land. They do not only value the roses, they also understand the role of the thorns, the utility of the stinging nettles, and the necessity of the decaying leaves that nourish the soil. They don't try to make the garden a sterile, predictable place. They work with the natural cycles of growth and decay, knowing that each element has its place in the balance of the whole. Our lives are that garden. Our losses are the decaying leaves, providing the richness that allows the new blossoms of wisdom to grow. When we walk with grace, we become the gardener of our own souls, tending to our sorrow with the same care and attention we give to our joy. There was once a village located at the edge of a great, shifting desert. The people there were experts at navigating the dunes, but they lived in constant fear of the sandstorms that could bury a home in a single afternoon. One man, however, didn't build high walls or hide in a cellar when the winds began to pick up. Instead, he built a house with many windows and doors that could swing open. When the sand started to blow, he opened everything and let the wind whistle through the rooms. The sand blew in, but it also blew right out the other side. While his neighbors spent days digging their houses out of the drifts, his home remained clear, with only a fine dusting of gold on the floors. He explained that the problem wasn't the wind or the sand, the problem was the resistance. By trying to keep the desert out, his neighbors were actually inviting it to pile up against their walls. By letting it flow through, he remained a part of the desert without being buried by it. Our grief is like that blowing sand. If we try to shut all the windows and doors of our hearts, the pain piles up against us until we feel suffocated. But if we can find the courage to stay open, to let the emotions flow through us without clinging to them or pushing them away, we find that we can survive the storm. We might be covered in a fine dust of sorrow, but we are not buried. We are still standing, and we are still free. This open-door policy toward our emotions is one of the most difficult and yet most rewarding aspects of the journey. It requires a profound trust in our own resilience. We have to believe that we are strong enough to let the wind blow through us. We have to trust that we will not be scattered or destroyed by the intensity of our feelings. This trust is built one breath at a time. Each time we sit with a difficult emotion and simply watch it arise, peak, and fade away, we are strengthening our capacity for grace. We are learning that we are the house, not the sand. The stories of the ancient masters are filled with examples of this kind of radical acceptance. They didn't seek out suffering, but when it arrived, they met it with a steady, unblinking gaze. They knew that the self that feels the pain is only a small part of a much larger reality. There is a part of us that is like the deep ocean, where the water is always still and clear, no matter how much the surface is tossed by the wind. When we find our way to that inner depth, the losses of the world still affect us, but they do not overwhelm us. We feel the movement on the surface, but we are anchored in the silence below. In a kingdom long ago, there was a jeweler who was famous for creating the most beautiful necklaces in the world. He was once commissioned by a queen to create a piece that captured the essence of her long and eventful life. The jeweler spent months searching for the perfect gems. He used bright diamonds for her triumphs, deep blue sapphires for her quiet reflections, and dark, smoky quartz for her times of great sorrow. When he presented the finished necklace, the queen was struck by the beauty of the dark stones. She realized that without them, the diamonds would have looked cold and the sapphires would have seemed shallow. The dark stones gave the necklace its soul. Our lives are like that necklace. Each experience, whether bright or dark, is a precious gem that adds to the value and the beauty of the whole. If we try to remove the dark stones of our grief, we are not making our lives better, we are making them less complete. We are losing the contrast that allows the light to truly shine. Grace is the ability to wear the whole necklace with pride, recognizing that every stone was earned through the courage of living fully. We don't hide the dark gems, we let them catch the light in their own unique way. As we walk through the meadows, we see that the path is not just a trail on the ground, but a movement within our own consciousness. We are becoming more aware of the subtle interplay between the light and the dark, the seen and the unseen. We start to perceive the presence of those we have lost in the most unexpected places, in the tilt of a stranger's head, in the melody of a song we haven't heard in years, or in the sudden, quiet sense of peace that descends upon us when we are alone in nature. These are not just memories, they are the ongoing presence of love that has moved beyond the limitations of form. There was a forest dweller who spent his life observing the trees. He noticed that when a great tree fell, it didn't just disappear. It became a nurse log, providing a home and nourishment for countless mosses, ferns, and tiny saplings. The fallen tree was actually more full of life after it fell than it was when it was standing tall. It had become a foundation for an entire ecosystem. This is a beautiful way to think about the legacy of a life. Even when the tree of a physical presence falls, it continues to nourish everything around it. It becomes the soil in which new life takes root. It provides the shelter and the nutrients that allow others to grow. When we look at our own lives, we can see the nurse logs left behind by those who came before us. We are growing in the soil of their love, their sacrifices, and their wisdom. We are the continuation of their story. This realization moves us from a sense of loss to a sense of profound gratitude. We see that we are never truly starting from scratch. We are always building on the foundations laid by those who loved us. This is the lineage of grace, an unbroken chain of connection that spans across time and space. We are part of something much larger than our individual selves, and that is a source of immense strength. The Buddha often reminded his followers that the search for a permanent, unchanging self is the source of all suffering. We are like a river, always the same river but never the same water. When we try to freeze the water, we create ice, which is hard and brittle. When we let the water flow, it is soft, powerful, and life-giving. Our grief is often the result of trying to hold on to a particular bucket of water that has already moved downstream. Grace is the willingness to let go of the bucket and jump into the river. It's the realization that the river itself is where the life is, not in the individual drops we try to capture. There was a group of weavers who worked together on a massive loom, creating a tapestry that told the history of their people. Each weaver was responsible for a small section, and they often didn't see the work of their neighbors until the piece was finished. One weaver became very upset when she was told to use a dark, heavy thread for several days in a row. She felt it was ruining the beauty of her section. But when the tapestry was finally taken off the loom and displayed, she saw that her dark threads had created the shadow of a great mountain, which made the golden sun in the center of the tapestry look 10 times more brilliant. She realized that her work, which had felt so heavy and dull at the time, was actually essential to the beauty of the whole. We are like those weavers, often only seeing the single thread of our current sorrow. We don't see the mountain we are building, or the way our dark threads are highlighting the gold in someone else's life. Grace is the trust that there is a master weaver who sees the whole pattern, and that every thread we contribute is necessary and valued. We don't have to see the whole tapestry to do our work with love and care. We just have to keep weaving. This sense of being part of a larger purpose can be a great comfort when the path feels steep. We realize that our struggle is not just for ourselves, but for everyone who will come after us. By walking through our grief with grace, we are creating a clearer path for others. We are showing them that it is possible to survive, to heal, and to find meaning again. We are becoming the elders of the Spirit, those who can look back and say, "I have been where you are, and I promise you that the sun will rise again." This is the highest form of service, the most profound way to turn our personal pain into a collective blessing. As the sun begins to dip toward the horizon, the colors of the meadow become even more intense. The long shadows return, but this time they don't feel threatening. They feel like a soft blanket being laid over the earth. We find a comfortable place to sit and watch the transition from day to night. We are not afraid of the coming darkness, because we know that the stars are waiting to reveal themselves. We have learned that the light and the dark are not enemies, but partners in the dance of existence. We are at peace with the rhythm, at peace with the change, and at peace with ourselves. The journey continues, but the quality of our walking has changed. We no longer move with the frantic energy of someone trying to escape, but with the steady, measured pace of someone who has found their way home. We carry our history with us, but it no longer feels like a weight. It feels like a story we are honored to tell, a song we are privileged to sing. We are the walking embodiment of grace, a living testament to the power of the human heart to transform even the deepest sorrow into a source of enduring light. The deepening twilight over the meadow does not signal an end but a transition into a different kind of knowing, where the sharp outlines of the day dissolve into a soft and inclusive vastness. We sit in this quietude, realizing that our grief has not been a detour from our life but the very path that has led us to this profound depth of being. It is as if we have been carving a bowl out of the raw timber of our experiences, and the deeper the carving, the more space there is to hold the nectar of existence. This capacity to hold both the sorrow and the peace simultaneously is the hallmark of a soul that has matured through the fires of loss. We no longer feel the need to choose between being sad or being whole, because we have discovered that wholeness is the very container that allows sadness to exist without consuming us. There is a story of an old potter who lived near the edge of a great forest and spent his days shaping clay into simple, elegant jars. One day, a traveler stopped by and noticed that the potter was intentionally leaving tiny, almost invisible gaps in the lids of some of his most beautiful vessels. The traveler, puzzled by this, asked if the potter was worried that dust or insects might get inside and spoil what was kept within. The old man smiled and explained that a jar that is sealed too tightly can never breathe. He said that if the air inside cannot meet the air outside, the contents eventually become stagnant and lose their life. The tiny gaps were not flaws, they were the invitations for the world to enter and for the essence of the jar to reach out. Our hearts are like those jars crafted by the old potter. When we experience a great loss, it can feel as though the lid has been shattered or that a permanent crack has formed in our foundation. Our first instinct is often to try and seal ourselves off, to create a vacuum where no more pain can reach us. But in doing so, we also prevent the light, the breath, and the connection of the world from entering. Grace is the wisdom to keep those small gaps open. It is the courage to remain permeable, to allow our sorrow to breathe and our love to circulate. We realize that the very brokenness we feared is actually the ventilation our souls need to stay vibrant and connected to the collective heartbeat of humanity. In the chronicles of the ancient teachers, there is a mention of a seeker who climbed the highest peak in search of the secret to overcoming the suffering of the world. After many weeks of arduous climbing, he found a sage sitting quietly by a small pool of water that never seemed to ripple, even in the wind. The seeker asked how he could achieve such a state of unchanging calm, believing that this was the ultimate goal of the spiritual path. The sage did not answer with words but reached down and picked up a small, smooth stone from the edge of the pool. He dropped it into the water, and as the ripples spread outward, he told the seeker that the goal is not to stop the ripples, but to be the water that knows how to return to its stillness after the stone has arrived. He explained that a heart that cannot ripple is a heart that has become like stone, cold and unfeeling. The beauty of the water lies in its ability to respond to the stone, to feel its weight, and then to settle back into its natural state of peace. Walking through grief with grace is exactly like that pool of water. We do not aim for a state of numbness where nothing can touch us. Instead, we cultivate a spaciousness of spirit that can receive the stones of loss, allow the ripples of emotion to move through us completely, and then return to a state of quiet presence. We trust that the stillness is our fundamental nature, and the ripples are simply a temporary expression of our engagement with life. This perspective allows us to be deeply moved by our memories and our longings without becoming lost in them. We can feel the sharp tug of a missing presence and still remain anchored in the reality of the present moment. We start to see that our grief is not a heavy chain dragging us backward, but a golden thread that keeps us connected to the beauty of what we have loved. This thread does not limit our movement, it enriches it. It gives our steps a sense of purpose and our interactions a quality of tenderness that was perhaps missing when everything felt permanent and secure. We move through the world with the soft footsteps of someone who knows that every encounter is a precious and fleeting gift. Think of the way a master weaver treats the loom. They do not only use the threads that are easy to handle, they also incorporate the ones that are rough, the ones that are thin, and the ones that carry a different texture. They know that a tapestry made of only one kind of thread would be flat and uninteresting. It is the combination of the diverse elements that creates the masterpiece. Our lives are the greatest masterpieces we will ever create, and our grief is one of the most textured and profound threads we have been given to work with. When we stop trying to pull that thread out of the loom, we begin to see the incredible depth and complexity it adds to the overall design. We see that our sorrow has given us a richness of character that joy alone could never provide. There was once a musician in a distant land who played a stringed instrument that was said to have been carved from a tree that had survived 1,000 storms. People would come from miles away to hear the music, saying it had a quality that could mend a broken spirit. One evening, a young student asked the musician what the secret was to such a hauntingly beautiful sound. The musician plucked a single string and let the note vibrate until it faded into silence. He said that the music does not come from the strings themselves, but from the empty space inside the body of the instrument. If the instrument were solid, there would be no resonance. It is the emptiness that allows the sound to grow, to deepen, and to reach the hearts of others. Our grief creates a similar kind of empty space within us. It hollows us out, removing the distractions and the superficialities that often clutter our lives. While this emptiness can feel cold and frightening at first, it is actually the very thing that allows our lives to have resonance. It is the hollow that allows the music of our soul to be heard. When we walk with grace, we stop trying to frantically fill that emptiness with noise or activity. We learn to sit with the space, to honor it, and to wait for the music to arise. We discover that our most profound contributions to the world often come from this place of quiet, hollowed-out depth. We become like the musician's instrument, capable of producing a sound that carries the wisdom of the storms we have survived. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world is still and the mind is less busy, we often feel the presence of our loss most acutely. In these moments, instead of turning away, we can practice a gentle form of loving kindness toward our own sorrow. We can place a hand on our heart and simply acknowledge the pain, saying to ourselves, "This is a moment of suffering, and I am here with it." This simple act of self-compassion is like a warm light in a dark room. It does not make the darkness go away, but it makes it less intimidating. We realize that we do not have to be over it, or better, to be worthy of our own kindness. We are enough, exactly as we are, with all our scars and our longings. The Buddha once said that the world is afflicted by death and decay, but the wise do not grieve, having known the nature of the world. This does not mean the wise do not feel pain or shed tears. It means they understand that loss is woven into the very fabric of existence. They do not take it personally or see it as an injustice. They see it as the turning of the great wheel of life. By accepting this fundamental truth, they are freed from the secondary suffering of resistance and resentment. They are able to walk through the world with a heart that is both wide open and completely at peace. This is the goal of our walk, to reach a place where we can look at the whole of life, the arrivals and the departures, and say a quiet, graceful yes to it all. There was a traveler who spent his life collecting the most beautiful stones from every river he crossed. He carried them in a heavy leather bag on his back, and as the years went by, the bag became almost too heavy to lift. One day, he met a child playing by a stream who asked him what was in the bag. The traveler proudly showed him the stones, explaining where each one came from and the memories they held. The child looked at the stones and then at the traveler's tired, bent back. He asked why the traveler was carrying the stones on his back when he could just as easily place them in the stream and watch the water flow over them. The traveler realized in that moment that his memories did not need to be a burden. He didn't have to carry the weight of the past to honor it. He began to place the stones, one by one, into the stream. As he did, he felt his back straighten and his heart lighten. He could still see the stones through the clear water, and they looked even more beautiful with the sun shining on them and the water dancing around them. He was still connected to his journey, but he was no longer weighed down by it. This is what it means to walk with grace. We release the heavy bag of our should-haves and what-ifs, and we place our memories in the flowing stream of the present moment. We honor the past by letting it be a part of the landscape, not a weight on our shoulders. As we move toward the final stretch of our path together, the light of the stars begins to guide us. The constellations are steady and bright, reminders of the vastness of the universe and the relatively small scale of our individual struggles. Yet, we also feel our own significance, knowing that we are the ones who give meaning to the stars by looking up at them. We are the consciousness that perceives the beauty, the heart that feels the love, and the spirit that finds the grace. We see that the journey through grief has not been a circle leading us back to where we started, but a spiral, leading us to a higher and more expansive vantage point. The air is crisp and cool, filled with the scent of the night-blooming jasmine and the damp earth. We feel a profound sense of connection to everything around us, the trees, the stars, the hidden creatures of the night, and the countless generations who have walked this path before us. We are not alone, and we never have been. We are part of the great, unfolding mystery of life, a mystery that includes both the shadow of the grave and the light of the morning. We have learned to walk with the ghost of our loss as a friend, a teacher, and a reminder to live every moment with depth and awareness. There is a quiet joy that begins to bubble up from within, a joy that is not dependent on things going our way, but on the simple fact of being alive and capable of feeling. It is the joy of the survivor who has found beauty in the ruins, the joy of the traveler who has reached the high pass and can see the horizon. This joy is quiet, steady, and indestructible. It is the final gift of grace, the realization that even in the heart of loss, there is a peace that surpasses all understanding. We take a final, deep breath, feeling the air fill our lungs and the life force moving through our veins. We are here. We are whole. And we are ready for whatever the next dawn brings. The starlight above reflects in the dew on the grass, creating a bridge of light between the heavens and the earth beneath our feet. As we continue this movement through the quiet landscape, we realize that the peace we have found is not a destination where everything is perfect, but a capacity to be at home in the imperfection. Our grief has become a quiet companion, no longer a storm that threatens to drown us, but a steady current that reminds us of the depth of our own humanity. We stand in this vast, open space and understand that the love we feared we had lost has simply changed its form, moving from the visible world into the very marrow of our bones. It is the silent strength in our hands when we help a friend, the clarity in our eyes when we witness a sunrise, and the warmth in our voice when we speak the truth. There is a tale of an ancient gardener who was tasked with tending the most diverse orchard in the world. He spent his life among trees of every kind, some that bore sweet fruit every season and others that remained bare for years. A young apprentice once asked him how he could remain so patient with the trees that seemed to give nothing back, the ones that stood like silent sentinels in the sun. The gardener replied that the trees were not doing nothing, they were deepening their roots. He explained that a tree that spends all its energy on fruit will be toppled by the first strong wind, but a tree that knows how to wait, how to grow in the dark and cold, develops a strength that is unshakable. He said that the beauty of the orchard was not just in the harvest, but in the endurance of the wood itself. We are like those trees in the gardener's care. The periods of our lives that felt the most empty, the seasons where we felt we had nothing to give and were only surviving the cold, were actually the times when our roots were reaching the deepest. The grief we endured forced us to anchor ourselves in a truth that is deeper than surface happiness. It taught us how to stand firm when the world around us was shifting. Now, as we walk with a lighter step, we carry that hidden strength with us. We are not fragile because we have been broken, we are resilient because we have learned how to grow in the broken places. The endurance of our spirit is the true harvest of our journey. This inner stability allows us to engage with the world with a renewed sense of wonder. When we are no longer paralyzed by the fear of loss, we can finally appreciate the true value of the present. We see that every conversation is a unique melody that will never be played exactly the same way again. We see that every shared meal is a sacred communion of life. We know spoken word is too small and no gesture of kindness is too insignificant. This is the grace of the fully awakened heart, the ability to see the extraordinary within the ordinary and to treat every moment as a once-in-a-lifetime encounter. We are no longer waiting for a better future or mourning a lost past, we are fully inhabited by the now. There was a traveler who arrived at the shore of a wide, misty lake and found an old boatman waiting there. The traveler was anxious to get to the other side, believing that his true life would only begin once he reached the opposite bank. He spent the entire crossing pacing back and forth in the small boat, looking ahead and ignoring the gentle rhythm of the oars and the way the mist danced on the water. When they finally arrived, the boatman looked at him with a kind of sad wisdom and said that the crossing was not a delay, it was the journey. The boatman explained that by rushing through the mist, the traveler had missed the only time he would ever have to be on that water, in that boat, with that particular light. Our time in the midst of sorrow is much like that crossing. We often treat it as a period to be endured, a gap in our real life that we must bridge as quickly as possible. But grace teaches us that the crossing is where the transformation happens. It is where we learn the rhythm of the oars, where we learn to sit with the uncertainty, and where we develop the vision to see the beauty in the gray. When we finally emerge into the light, we realize that we are not the same person who stepped into the boat. We have been changed by the water. We have been shaped by the silence. We have arrived not just at a new shore, but at a new way of being. In the old stories of the seekers, there is a recurring theme of finding a treasure in the most unlikely of places. Sometimes it is a pearl hidden inside a common shell, or a spring of sweet water found in the middle of a barren desert. These stories are reminders that the universe often hides its greatest gifts in the wrappers of our greatest difficulties. Our grief is such a wrapper. Inside the heavy, dark exterior of loss, we find the pearl of compassion. We find the spring of wisdom. We find a capacity for love that is no longer limited by possession or attachment. This treasure is not something we can lose, because it has become a part of who we are. It is the wealth of the soul that no external change can diminish. As we look around at our lives today, we can see the reflections of this treasure in how we relate to those around us. We are more patient with the flaws of others because we have seen our own. We are more generous with our presence because we know how much it matters. We are more courageous in our vulnerability because we know that we can survive the breaking. This is the practical, everyday expression of grace. It is not a lofty philosophical concept, but a lived reality that shows up in the way we listen, the way we work, and the way we love. We are the living proof that it is possible to walk through the fire and come out with a heart that is softer, not harder. The Buddha once compared his teachings to a raft used to cross a dangerous river. He said that once you reach the other side, you do not carry the raft on your back for the rest of your journey. You leave it behind, grateful for the service it provided, and you continue on your way, free and unencumbered. Our grief, our practices, and even these very words are like that raft. They are tools to help us navigate the deep waters of our emotions and reach the shore of peace. But there comes a point where we must leave the raft behind. We must step out into the open world and simply live. We do not need to keep thinking about the crossing, we just need to enjoy the warmth of the sun on the new shore. Walking with grace means knowing when to hold on and when to let go. It means honoring the lessons of the past while being fully open to the invitations of the future. We carry the essence of everyone we have lost within us, but we do not let their absence become a cage. We are the living representatives of their love, and the best way we can honor them is by living a life that is vibrant, meaningful, and kind. We are the bridge between what was and what will be, and we build that bridge with every conscious breath we take. Imagine a vast field of sunflowers, all turning their faces to follow the sun as it moves across the sky. They do not worry about the clouds that occasionally block the light, nor do they fret about the coming night. They simply remain oriented toward the source of their life. We can be like those sunflowers. Even when the clouds of sorrow are thick, we can keep our internal orientation toward the light of awareness and compassion. We can trust that the sun is still there, and that our nature is to reach for it. This steady, gentle turning is the essence of a graceful life. It is a quiet, persistent alignment with what is beautiful and true. There was an old scholar who spent his entire life studying the ancient texts, trying to find the one perfect sentence that would explain the meaning of existence. He read thousands of books and consulted with the greatest minds of his time. On his deathbed, his students gathered around him, hoping he would finally reveal the secret. The scholar looked out the window at a simple sparrow sitting on a branch, chirping at the rising sun. He smiled and said that the meaning was not in the books, but in the chirping. It was in the simple, unadorned fact of life expressing itself. He realized that the thousands of words he had read were just fingers pointing at the moon, but the sparrow was the moon itself. Our journey through loss often takes us on a similar path. We look for explanations, for reasons, and for ways to make sense of the senseless. But in the end, we find that the meaning is found in the simple act of living. It is in the taste of a fresh apple, the sound of the wind in the trees, and the feeling of a warm hand in ours. These moments do not need an explanation, they are their own justification. Grace is the ability to stop looking for the why and to start fully experiencing the is. We realize that the universe does not owe us an answer, but it offers us an infinite abundance of presence if we are willing to receive it. The path we have walked together has brought us back to the realization that we are fundamentally connected to everything that exists. There is no me that is separate from the world, and there is no loss that can truly disconnect us from the whole. We are like the waves on the ocean, each one unique and beautiful in its own rising and falling, but always part of the same vast, deep water. When one wave sinks back into the sea, it is not gone, it has simply returned to the source. And the source is always producing new waves. Understanding our own ocean nature is the ultimate peace. It is the realization that we are both the wave and the sea, both the mortal form and the immortal essence. As we take these final steps together in this shared reflection, we feel a deep sense of gratitude for the journey. We are grateful for the love that made the grief possible. We are grateful for the strength that allowed us to endure the darkness. And we are grateful for the grace that has brought us back to the light. We look at the horizon and see the first faint glow of a new dawn. It is a new day, a new beginning, and a new opportunity to express the beauty of our soul. We are ready to walk into this new day with our heads held high and our hearts wide open. We leave behind the need for certainty and embrace the beauty of the mystery. We leave behind the heaviness of the past and carry only the light of the lessons learned. We are travelers on an infinite road, and we know that every step is a sacred act. We breathe in the fresh air of the morning, feeling the vitality and the possibility that each new moment holds. We are at peace with our history, at home in our skin, and in love with the world. This is the grace we have found, the simple, profound, and enduring peace of being exactly who we are, exactly where we are, in the middle of it all. The birds begin their morning song, and the world wakes up to the promise of another cycle. We join this chorus not with words, but with the quiet radiance of our own presence. We are the walking embodiment of the light we once sought, a steady flame that carries the warmth of compassion into every corner of our lives. The walk continues, but the heavy lifting is done. We are moving with the flow, dancing with the changes, and resting in the stillness that holds it all. We are home.